You're welcome. Good morning, everybody. I've got this on the wrong, I got to go all the way up here. Oh, hold on, I'm going to stop sharing.
Yep.
And get me to the beginning of my presentation. Okay. What we all have learned, right? It's like unbelievable. Okay. There we go. Can you hear me okay, Terry?
Oh, yes, I can definitely hear you. Yes, we can.
Okay. It's going to keep.
Well, as Kimberly is getting situated, as we were saying, was how ironic that, 1 year ago, we were in a spot where we were at Canisius our last time together and talking about anxiety. And now we have to talk about how we can bring life back together.
Yes,
So
thank you for that, as I already managed technical difficulties. Well, good morning, everyone, and I'm grateful to all of you for bringing me back, and it's just really hard to believe what everyone has been through in the last year, considering it was practically a year ago. But I'm deciding it's a good sign, because when I was with you guys a year ago, I drove through a snowstorm to get to you. And on my way back, you guys don't even know this, but on my way back, the whole highway shut down and I had to take a quick detour into Northeast, and it was like white knuckling it all the way home. Today, the sun is shining, right? I think you guys have sunshine there as well. So what I'm going to talk with you guys about is literally resistance to resilience, and how all of you have managed to walk through this journey together. And so I'm going to really do my best to take care of all of you today. This is less about you learning anything and more about you just settling in and settling down and letting me do a little bit of care for you, letting you do a little self-care. We might have a little fun. And then at the end, we'll connect to hope, okay? So we're gonna go ahead and get started. And I just want you to just kind of check in. I thought this seems kind of appropriate. You're doing okay, not great, not amazing, not horrible, just okay. And that might be a whole lot better than you were in September or last March or April when everything was shut down. You had to quickly figure out how to reach students over the internet. So what I'm going to ask you all to do right now is just really kind of think about this. And, kind of go back over the last year and ask yourself, how did that go for me? I think I've been surprised. I've been working with all kinds of school districts over the last year, and it's been kind of fun to have these conversations in terms of, what has actually gone better than you would have expected. If I had told you when I met with all of you a year ago that we're about to go into a pandemic and you would all have to go online and you'd be afraid for your life and your family's life, and you would be nervous about how are these kids going to learn, what would you have thought would have happened and what actually happened? So if you wouldn't mind, I don't know if you all have a pen and paper in front of you, but it might help to get that. Just write down 3 ways that things have actually gone better than you would have expected, and 3 ways that things have maybe gone worse than you expected, or maybe that you're still really struggling with. And then if you could, let's hope that I can find the chat, share that in the chat, and I'll just read some of them. So just take a couple minutes and write down 3 ways that things are better than you expected or went better, and 3 ways that maybe you really struggled. So one person says better. 2 daughters get along better after so much together time, surprisingly. I know, that has been a silver lining for sure. Better than expected. Kids returning to school. Hybrid technology has been working smoothly. for our remote kids and low COVID numbers. Woohoo! And I know you guys are from all over New York, I think, or the Niagara area, maybe in the Buffalo area. Let's see who else is willing to post a better, getting used to wearing masks every single day for long periods of time. That's interesting, right? In the beginning, I had to actually do some videos and share them to help people learn how to tolerate using a mask. But like, if you guys remember what I shared with you in our first meeting, you know, everything is about practicing doing the thing we fear and teaching our brain how to handle it. And so we all learned how to wear masks. Less stress, more downtime, kids doing better in school, worse, work takes more steps. Yeah, yeah. Contact tracing adds stress to life, worry on a regular basis. Kids have gained independence. Yeah. You had time to take some online courses. Me too, because I didn't have to travel everywhere. I have done more learning myself than I ever have. Allowed us to slow down. Yeah. Phenomenal, because it's basketball season. And my wife will be coaching her first basketball game tonight. Oh, after a bad motorcycle accident. Well, I hope that goes really well. Read more books, cleaned out closets. Personal health. I just had my yearly physical, and he said, "What have you been doing over the last year? Your health is better than it's ever been." So some of us gained the COVID-19, some of us used it as a way to get healthier. See if anyone else wants to share. Okay, well then we're going to move on. Thanks for doing that. But I think the point is, and I don't know how often you guys even get to have conversations with each other, because some of you are in school, some of you aren't in school. But I think it's nice just to take this hour and a half and really connect with each other and kind of take stock of, you know, that this was really, really hard. And who would have guessed a year ago that you actually would have been doing better than you expected in some ways, right? And there really have been a lot of silver linings to COVID. I think we're tuned in a little bit more to what matters. I think we've quieted our lives down, and we've realized that that's been really healthy for us. And, you know, I imagine we could all have a conversation about, you know, what comes next if we actually get back to living, you know, the way that we're used to living in the next year. What's that actually going to look like? And are we truly going to go back to having kids be a part of all these sports and travel all over the place and, you know, be gone 5 nights a week? So I'm really going to challenge all of you to just pause and think about, you know, how do you want your life to look moving forward? Okay, now I gotta, when I go into chat, oh, see, this is, okay, there we go. Okay. So what we're going to do right now is just take care of ourselves for a minute. I'm going to have you guys what I call drop anchor, and this is a helpful thing to share with your students if you ever want to do that. If they're feeling stressed out and anxious, dropping anchor is an act. I don't know if any of you have trained in ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy, but it's a kind of a useful image, and that's where you really kind of take your energy and you move it down. And so what we're going to do is we're just going to take a minute here and we're going to breathe with a longer exhale. I'm wondering how many of you remember from last year, I was teaching you all how to breathe, and I can't believe how many people have never heard that you're supposed to breathe with a longer exhale. So I'm just going to remind you, so that you can also remind your students, that when you connect to breath, you want it to be a longer exhale so that your brain actually interprets it as a calming breath rather than a longer inhale, which your brain experiences as that there's something stressful or dangerous going on. So dropping anchor means just connecting to your breath with a longer exhale and really imagining the energy going down to your feet, okay? And you can look at my picture if you want. This was back when we could travel. I was in Norway because that's where my family is from. And I was sailing in the fjords. So you can look at the picture, or you can close your eyes, or you can look at your room. But I'm just going to be silent for a minute. I want you to try to breathe with a longer exhale and just begin to feel your energy go down to your feet, and just notice that the floor is there and it's supporting you, okay? I wonder how often you take just a minute out to connect to your breath and feel your feet on the ground. It's actually a very simple thing that just kind of helps recalibrate us and remind us to tune into the present moment and to only allow ourselves to think about what we have control over right now, and that is connection and taking a step forward. So challenge yourself just to take a breath once in a while and just pause. It doesn't take more than a minute for your brain and your body to just, quiet itself and recalibrate for a minute. So let's talk about where we've been. Oh my goodness, right? From pandemic to politics. I mean, who could have guessed that we'd put both of those together, right? Illness to justice issues. I mean, the way I've been talking about this with schools is that we've really had two pandemics, haven't we? One is related to the coronavirus, but the other one is related to social justice issues. And what I believe, I don't know anything for sure, but what I believe is the universe brings us what we need to know. I didn't think we needed to have it all at one time, but clearly these were issues that all of you know very, very well, right? And they exposed the cracks. I think people for a long time were kind of just, riding along. And this was underneath everything. And so when these things came to the surface, we had to deal with them. And I'm wondering, if we could just take a minute and maybe again put in chat, what has been harder for you to deal with, the pandemic or the social justice issues? And does anyone want to just write a quick chat about what what did you do related to the social justice issues while you're all teaching virtually? Maybe you weren't able to do anything with it, but I just want to acknowledge that these things are really important and they're really challenging, I think. So I'm going to bring up chat again, except for then I'm going to have to figure out how to get my thing going. Let's see what people have to say. Anybody willing to comment on lack of student engagement? Yeah, I felt compelled to discuss a social justice issue with my young daughters at home. Yeah. I asked one of my students if their teachers were talking about voluntary staff meetings discussing social justice issues in light of Black History Month. Yeah, Black History Month is really a wonderful time. As we kind of catch our breath with the coronavirus, it's kind of a nice opportunity to address some of this. I was surprised at the number of clients I have that are students that said that the social justice issues weren't addressed in their classes. And again, I think everyone's just doing the best they can, no judgment from me, but I kind of hope that as we move forward, we see how important this is to bring in. Shocking to see things unfold on TV, feeling removed from what happened out there, but so unbelievable. Yeah, in some ways, many of us are really protected from all of that. And we certainly see white privilege all over the place, right? I'm so aware of that. Okay. I hate to miss anyone else's remark, but thank you for sharing. I'm going to click out of that now. So these are issues that are not going to go away, and coronavirus is not going to go away, but I'm hoping that as we all kind of do what we talked about a year ago, which is just learn how to face it, feel it, and move forward with that truth, that's going to help us. Okay, so one thing that I think is really important is that we kind of learn how to be vulnerable and that we create a safe place to be vulnerable with each other. And so this is a bingo game, and the more vulnerable you are, the more chances you have to win. And so on the piece of paper that you guys have, you might want to kind of make a bingo card on your paper. And I'm going to read through these, and you kind of make an X as to whether this has happened to you over the last year or not. And if you get bingo, I want you to email me, and you're going to email me at kimberly@anxietytraining.com. But I don't even think you have to worry about writing that email down, because at the end of this, Terry's going to forward an email to you from me, and you can just reply. My email should be on there, and you can reply to it, okay? This is something you can use with students, because one of the things I'll tell you about the clients that I have that are students is they also feel disconnected from people, and they really feel like they're the only ones that are struggling. And, when you're on a Zoom class, nobody's going to talk about struggling. And so if you can have some fun with struggling, and that the truth is that every single one of us have had challenging experiences, it goes a long way to kind of giggle at ourselves and laugh about the things that have happened in the last year. So I'm going to start reading through them. You guys start marking, and you can maybe put in chat if you got a bingo. Okay, you forgot to unmute yourself on Zoom. I'm going to go down. You didn't turn off your message notifications on your computer, so they kept clicking, sounding and sounding. You had a nightmare of being naked when Zoom started. Or maybe you were naked when Zoom started. That's even worse. You cried at the end of the day. I think many of us have shed tears over the last year, right? You couldn't get logged in for the parent meeting. You experienced the disparity in access to services for students. Wow, here in Erie, we worked so hard, and so many kids just didn't even have access to the internet, right? I'm sure all of you spent those first few months just trying to figure out how to get that to people. You couldn't figure out how to put sound on your video. Okay, that one's mine. You told yourself you would never do an online class or teletherapy or meet this way, right? Look at what we've done, you guys. Your partner started singing during your Zoom meeting. My husband turned on, I was in the dining room doing a Zoom meeting, and my husband turned on some sci-fi movie and blared the music as loud as could be. And everybody on the meeting said, "Do you guys hear that? What is that?" And it turned out it was a sci-fi movie. The internet didn't work. That happened to me, and I had to figure out, I don't know if you guys have figured out how to use your hotspots on your phone. You couldn't mute students. Maybe you yelled at your child without the mute on. Everybody gets bingo. You're nervous to go to school for fear you'll get COVID. Some of you are back to school. Some of you aren't back to school. Some of you have maybe gotten COVID already. Others are just afraid, and you just feel like it's nipping at your heels. Maybe you drank a lot of really good wine and beer this past year. It's funny, right? In the beginning, how we all decided to let this be the reason why we got to bake a little bit more and stock up on some good alcohol. Did your cat walk on your computer during the meeting? Mine has. All of my clients have met my animals. Did you gain the COVID-19? Have you stayed up later and slept in more during the pandemic? Those are some hard habits to break. Boy, for the kids, I'm telling you, the kids are kind of loving either the hybrid model they're in or the online school, because they get to sleep in a little bit more. And the research shows that kids actually perform better when they sleep in more. Maybe your naked child walked across while on Zoom. Did you have a student fall asleep while on a Zoom call with you? Did you threaten to retire at the end of this year? Maybe you cried before the school year started. Maybe back in August, you thought, I don't really know how I'm going to do this. Have you had a student refuse to turn their camera on? So I have several students that are on the autism spectrum. And one of them, I've actually got her to turn her camera on, but the only thing I ever see is her ceiling. But that's progress, because before she wouldn't even turn her camera on. Did you have a student show up with pajamas on? Or maybe you showed up with pajamas on. Maybe you have your pajamas on right now and none of us know it. That's been kind of a nice thing, right? Because at least from the waist down, we've gotten to be a little bit more comfortable, right? So I don't know how many of you got, let me just see if anyone chatted in here. I don't know how many of you got bingo, but please, if you email me at kimberly@anxietytraining.com, I will send you a link to my book. Another way that I had to become flexible and climb over obstacles is rather than being in person and giving you guys out my book for participating, I now have it on ebook. And so I will send you a virtual copy of my book if you got bingo, okay? All right. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some examples of the struggle that I have heard over the last year, because I think it just helps to not feel alone. And maybe these examples you're going to really resonate with. And again, this is just all about us being connected together and being vulnerable and having a safe place to experience that. So the first one I'm going to talk about is the Golden Apple Award winner. And so this was a teacher who had won the Golden Apple Award last year. She was an older teacher. She had a template on how to help kids learn that was like no other. And she just had success over and over and over again with students, particularly those who were challenged in learning. And then COVID hit. And she crumbled. She didn't believe she could figure out how to do this online. The students that were doing well weren't doing so well anymore. And she went from feeling like she had figured it all out to feeling like she had nothing figured out. And this was just really a struggle with her. And I'm wondering, I don't know how much as counselors, teachers have gone to you. I mean, maybe your main roles with students, but I imagine at some point you guys are helping each other out, right, as well. So this particular teacher had gone to a counselor, and they had called me up to see if we could get her some help. But, you know, what we recognized was that those teachers that were older and had a formula, they had to throw that formula out the window. But teachers that were newer, and maybe even some of you counselors, this is true for maybe those of you that are newer and kind of grew up with technology, you just could kind of move forward. But the ones who had really never done this before, you know, your anxious brain just freaks out and shuts down, and you think there's no way I can do this. The good news is she did figure out eventually, and she is back being an amazing teacher online. But that was really a hard time for her. I had another time where I was doing a Zoom meeting with a school district, and the counselor, you know, came on to the meeting, and she said, we were talking about being vulnerable with each other. And she's like, well, I want to say something. And she's like, I literally just got diagnosed with COVID, and I've been with all of you for the last week. They were still in person. This was a school district that was kind of in the country. And she just cried, and she said, I'm less worried about having COVID than I am that I have now possibly spread it to all of you. And that took us quite a long time to process, because everyone was just hearing it for the first time. She felt tremendous shame about it. And I want to just speak to all of you related to, you know, shame. Shame is when, you know, it talks about who we inherently are as a person. And it's something that happens to us when we didn't have an intention to harm. There really isn't any room for shame. We might feel guilty about that. There's things that cause us to be embarrassed, but shame is a really deep-rooted thing. And I really would challenge people to just, again, have forgiveness and a lot of grace for each other during this time. Because all kinds of things are happening that none of us have control over. And if we have the, you know, the intention of blaming someone or judging them or being upset with someone for coming to work, you know, and then finding out they had COVID, it doesn't move anybody forward. It doesn't help any of us. And I know some of the school districts I worked with, there was a period of time where people kind of felt like they were struggling with each other, and that they weren't all on the same team. So let's just drop judgment, know that it's going to happen. It's going to happen in your school district, that someone's going to get COVID, and you will have been exposed. The next story is out of reach, and that is of a teacher talking about a lot of work that she had done with a particular student, and now that they were doing everything online, this student half the time wasn't even showing up, and the counselor had reached out to the family. The family wouldn't return phone calls, and they were really worried that all the hard work that they did is gone, is lost. And so if that's a worry that any of you have, like some of these students that you guys have worked so hard with their anxiety or with their ADHD, or you know, they're finally raising their hand in class and talking, but they won't do it on Zoom. You know, I want to say to you, yes, people may be struggling more now, but I think you're going to find that when we all get back to being in person and in class, that kids will get back on their path much quicker than we are fearing. Okay. So be careful that you don't let your own fear, you know, prevent you from believing what's possible. Okay. And I just think we're going to be surprised at how resilient these kids are. And the last story I'm going to tell you is about savoring the good. And that is about a kid, this teacher who was in a, I'm trying to think of, like, I know each classroom can be a different name, but this was a special needs classroom. And this was a child who, and they were in school, a child who was really, really, really challenging, throwing fits every single day. With COVID, people were scared to death to handle him, to try and calm him. He was spitting at people. They were scared. And so the teacher and the counselor came in and were kind of processing this together. And what had just happened, so they were saying just how challenging it was to deal with them. And then what happened was, just the day before we all were meeting, the student handed the counselor a meeting and asked the counselor to give it to this particular teacher who only came into the classroom when he was in a lot of trouble. And the letter was just beautiful. It said, I know I've given you a really hard time, and I want to thank you for being so good to me and continuing to try. And so they read the letter to our meeting, and it reminded us of, in all of this hardship, there are those moments that are absolutely beautiful, right? That remind us why we do what we do. And I hope each of you have had a few of those times, because I think it makes, you know, these really hard times worthwhile. I even think that sometimes these really painful times help us tune in to those really small wins, and sometimes the really big wins. But I think that they help us really savor them and make us realize that there's a lot of good that's going on in the world, even though there's some really hard things. So let's talk a little bit about how far you guys have come. And again, I've talked with a lot of schools, so I know that none of this is perfect. I know that this might be, you know, like the best version of everything, but I'm going to believe that you're well on your way to doing these things, okay? So you've been able to stay united. I sometimes talk about Red Rover, like, you know, you guys had to figure out how you're going to lock elbows against coronavirus and find a way. For those of you who have been in person in schools, or maybe you're doing, you know, that some kids are coming in the morning, some in the afternoon, or some are coming Monday, Wednesday, Friday. But those were all the ways that you found on, this is what we're going to do to prevent coronavirus from entering our building. I think one of the things that happened over time is that kids and all of you began to feel like school isn't a safe place anymore, right? And we don't want that to be. For some of your kids, they relied on school being their safe place. So I am just astounded at what all of you figured out on how to make your schools a safe place, or how to make Zoom classes a safe way to learn for people. But you did it, and that's just amazing. Okay, I can't, this is funny, I can't read my next one. Oh, you learned how to, because I have a little thing that says you are sharing your screen right on top of this, but it's, I think it's something about, I actually have it here. You learned how to give information and support virtually. Well, we know that, but again, it's fairly amazing that you were able to do that. And it's also amazing that everybody in the world, like literally everybody in the world, figured out in about a month or two how to provide information to each other virtually. And so that's like just a super cool thing. I think you changed your expectations, right? I think maybe you started to focus on connection. You figured out how to be flexible. You learned how to climb over obstacles. And all that maybe was scary, because maybe before you just had to like figure out how to hold an IEP meeting, how to, meet these kids' needs. But now you're holding meetings and you're all like, I don't even really know. I literally, just before we got on, I was communicating with a counselor at a middle school, and she has one of my clients who's an 8th grader who had selective mutism when he was young, and now he can talk now, but he has still severe social anxiety. And the mom was saying that, and he also just moved this year to their school district. So the mom was saying, Kimberly, can you please talk with this counselor and figure out a way for him to meet friends? And so I emailed the counselor and included the mom in it. And I just said to her, this is the hardest time ever to meet friends. And so not only do we have a socially anxious kid who has a hard time communicating and talking, but it's during a time when kids, if you're in school, you're 6 feet apart with masks on and not interacting with each other. And so I said, first of all, let's just, start where the truth is. And that is that this has less to do with this kid's social anxiety and more to do with reality. And anyways, the counselor emailed me back and she said, thank you for that. Because I have been, just beating myself up that we haven't been able to find a way for this kid to connect. And so I think sometimes it's helpful just to, be honest and say, this is what we can do. And once we start there, we can maybe find some ways for this child to meet one-on-one with someone, or to get involved with student council when they meet on Zoom. There are things we can do, but I think it helps just to start with the truth. So again, you maybe developed a system that met kids where they're at. I feel like things had to go. So, like if there's a triangle in terms of, what gets the most of your attention and what gets less of your attention, teaching and academics and getting these kids the skills that they need to move forward to the next grade. That was always the most important thing. I think now we kind of moved that around, right? And now prioritizing relationship building, asking for help, addressing anxiety issues, and maybe making sure that there's well-being over good grades. And that was a real shift. And I can tell you what students have been telling me is it has been such an opportunity for them to take a breath. Those perfectionists, they found out that it's okay. It's okay not to do things perfectly. It's okay that, they didn't hand in an assignment, or maybe the group that they were working on, that they weren't the one leading the group all the time. So a lot of people learned that, being good enough sometimes really is the best we can do. You guys discovered how to enjoy quiet nights and weekends to replenish. And I hope you can continue. I think you really need to look at what worked for you during COVID, and how can you stay connected to that when we move forward and get busy again. Not that you haven't been busy, but it's going to look a lot different in the next year. And then you move through denial, through anger and resistance, to acceptance, right? That's been the most amazing thing. And maybe you go back and forth. Maybe, when numbers got really high again in January, maybe you went back into, I can't do this, or maybe you started getting a whole bunch of toilet paper again, or, it's kind of funny watching what we do when our amygdalas get activated and we feel fear again, right? Or maybe your friend gets COVID and all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, I hate COVID. I can't stand this anymore. And for me, it's so interesting. I go into these places of resistance and I'm so tired and I just want to have dinner with my friend again. And I let myself be in that place for a little bit. And then I remember, if I shift positions, I get back to accepting, but this is the truth right now. So what can I do right now? Can I do a Zoom happy hour with her? Can we go for a walk in the freezing cold? Let's find a way rather than staying connected to that resistance. But I moved in and out of it, quite a bit. So I imagine most of you are finding that you've come a long way as well. And I hope you're giving yourselves a pat on the back and just really being amazed at what you've been able to do. So with that, this is where we're going to kind of go into breakout rooms, but don't do it yet. What I want to do is have you guys think about what you've learned personally, and I want you to do it kind of on a few different levels. One, I want you to first write down, what have you learned about yourself? What did you learn that you were capable of that you didn't have any idea that you could? So if you could just maybe jot down these cues. What have you learned about yourself? What have you learned about your students and your colleagues? And listen, this doesn't have to all be like wonderful stuff, right? Like make it real stuff, because remember, we're going to be vulnerable with each other. So what did you learn about yourself? What did you learn about your students and colleagues? And the last one is, what did you learn about your community or the United States or the world, right? So what I want to do is I want to give you 3 or 4 minutes. Terry, I'll let you know when to put into breakout rooms, but I think if we go into breakout rooms now, people will just start chatting and they won't have actually done the work. So I'm going to be quiet and I'm going to ask you guys to write just a couple thoughts around each of those topics. And then I'll be the keeper of the time. In 3 or 4 minutes, I'll ask us to go into rooms, and then we're going to share this with each other for 15 minutes.
Some good discussion. Those were really good topics.
Okay.
So
I think we should all be back.
Everybody's back? All right. We ended that about 5 minutes early, everyone. So for those of you who weren't able to share, maybe you can have that conversation at your dinner table tonight, or maybe sit on the back porch when it's going to be 40 or 50 degrees out in the next few days, and talk with one of your colleagues about that. So hopefully that stimulated some good conversation. And again, it makes you focus on, you know, what you've learned, not what got taken away from you. And that's kind of how we're going to move forward as well. In a few minutes, we're going to, you know, really talk about what does recovery look like. So before we get there, here we go again. I'm going to share with you a little bit about, you know, what I've learned through this, and we're going to do a compassion meditation together. Okay. So I feel like the compassion meditation really, I don't know if you've ever done one, but you're about to, really encapsulates kind of my experience with this pandemic. And that was, you know, just this idea of all we can do is focus on the present moment, right? That sometimes just, you know, the next hour felt like too much and too scary. But we had to really kind of get back to what it was that we can do, and to really hold a space for what we were feeling. So there were times where I would wake up and just had this sense of foreboding, like, right, there were times when it felt like, are we going to survive this? And there really wasn't anything we could do with those feelings. There was nothing we could do to get rid of them. We couldn't exercise them out or eat them out, although we tried both, right? So we really had to practice all the things that I tried to teach you guys at our last meeting a year ago, which is just being able to accept and allow those feelings in a non-judgmental way, and get up and start walking through the day, whatever it was that we were going to face. And then that connection to humanity. It's been just amazing how something so terrifying could connect every one of us, and take away the socioeconomic changes and take away the racial differences and all of that. Like, ultimately, we were all vulnerable to this virus. And I believe we are all connected anyways. And so it just helped me really kind of stay grounded in that connection. And then I kept saying to myself, the only thing I could do was to show kindness to myself and others, that this was hard for all of us. And so at the end of the day, the way I decided it was a good day is if I had just been able to show kindness to myself and others. And so let's create a space right now, and I'm going to walk you through or talk you through a compassion meditation. And so some of you may not be comfortable with meditation. I completely understand that, but hopefully you're just open to having an experience. And I would really encourage you to get comfortable. If you're at home, you know, make sure you're in a comfortable chair. If you're at school, You might want to take your shoes off and just feel your feet on the ground. Maybe you want to turn some lights off. This is going to be about 10 minutes or so. And so I'm just going to give you guys all a minute just to kind of get settled. If you're cold, throw a blanket around you. If you're hot because you're a woman in her 50s like me, roll your sleeves up, and we'll get started. I see a few people creating their space. That makes me so happy. Because, you know, you could be thinking, oh, no, I don't need that. But if you really give yourself permission to ask yourself, what do I need right now to be present for this experience? And you allow yourself to turn off your light or to throw on a blanket or put a pillow behind your back, your mind and body will thank you for it. Okay. So if you would just begin to connect to your breath. Again, you can have your eyes open or eyes closed, whatever makes you most comfortable. If your eyes are open, you might want to just kind of stare down at something or look out your window. But just begin to connect to that breath with a longer exhale. And as you connect to your breath, you might begin to feel tension in your body, or you might begin to feel your mind quieting. Whatever you experience during the next several minutes, just allow it. Be curious about it. And if you find yourself kind of getting hijacked by a thought, just come back to your breath. Let it anchor you. And let my words be your words. Feel your feet on the ground and the chair supporting you. And know that even though we are all together virtually, you are supported by your colleagues, and they know the journey you've been on. So now I just want you to think about yourself over the last year. Maybe get an image of a time when you were really struggling. Again, you can close your eyes or keep them open. But just get in your mind's eye a memory of when you were struggling. And I want you to look at yourself and say, may you find peace. May you be free from suffering. May you find peace. May you be free from suffering. And now I want you to think of your family, loved ones that may be near or far. Look them each in the eye and whisper to them, may you find peace. May you be free from suffering. May you find peace. May you be free from suffering. And now I want you to widen your circle. Include the people you work with, your fellow counselors, the teachers in your school, the students you work with. Imagine holding their hands, looking in their eyes, and saying, may you find peace. May you be free from suffering. May you find peace. May you be free from suffering. And now open your circle a little more and welcome in the people from your neighborhood, from your community. Know that everyone has been suffering during this time. Some may have lost people they've loved dearly. Some may be sitting in the hospital right now. Some may be struggling to find justice. Welcome them into your circle and say, may you find peace. May you be free from suffering. May you find peace. May you be free from suffering. And now I want you to think about someone you've really been struggling with. Maybe someone who's hurt your feelings. Maybe someone who you disagree with politically. Maybe someone who you don't feel followed the rules during this pandemic. Think about offering them grace and forgiveness. Look at them and say, may you find peace. May you be free from suffering. May you find peace. May you be free from suffering. And now we're going to connect ourselves to the entire world, because that's what this pandemic has done. It has reminded us that we are connected. We always have been connected, and we always will be. It's a beautiful thing. And so say to the world, may you find peace. May you be free from suffering. May you find peace. May you be free from suffering. Take a deep breath and let it out. And let's come back to where we started. Because if you don't start with offering yourself kindness, it's hard to be available to others. And so we'll end where we began, whispering in your ear, may you find peace. May you be free from suffering. Notice what you're feeling in your body. Take a couple of breaths with a longer exhale. And when you're ready, wiggle your toes, wiggle your fingers, maybe move your head around a little bit. And if your eyes are closed, you can open them. And you may just kind of want to stay in your darkened room with your blanket on, or you may want to take a minute to kind of bring yourself back to the present moment. And for those of you who are willing to join me on that, I really appreciate it. I think as much as all of us talk to other people about taking care of themselves and being vulnerable, I think it's hard to do. I think it's easy to just move on in our day and be busy. And I wonder how many of you have meditation as just a practice in your life. If it's something that you would consider adding, literally you can do it for just 2 or 3 minutes a day, and it can make a big difference in your well-being. So let's move to talking about what recovery looks like. So first of all, it's hard for me to kind of get back into talking because I went to a nice place. I maybe should have ended with that, but we're actually going to end with a lot of energy today. So we're going to kind of slowly bring ourselves back into this moment. And so I think a lot of you are kind of looking at, so where do we go from here, right? And I think to really successfully move forward, you want to make sure that you're connecting to facts and not fears. You know, this has been going on prior to the pandemic, prior to the political issues, but it's really come clear, right? That if we're not grounded in facts and we're connecting to fears and we're sharing those fears with others through social media, through gossip, that has not served anybody and it has harmed us tremendously. So make sure that when you're in recovery, when you're in this place of acceptance and not in this place of fear and resistance, that you're checking facts, that you're checking the facts of the students that you talk to or your colleagues or your friends. Because even though we've hopefully learned this lesson, I think you all know that fears are the first things to be shared, and that's because your amygdala gets activated, right? We feel emotional, and one of the things that happens when we are fearful is that we have the need to share it with others, to check it out, to get reassurance, to feel better about things. So just make sure you're connecting to facts. Be mindful of what you are saying to yourself. You know, be careful that you're not the first critical person to comment on what happened, right? Terry, you keep talking about, you know, your COVID brain and your stress of COVID and the fear that you had about putting us into groups. If there's anything that this has taught us is that we're all human and we all make mistakes. And we just have to make space for that and own it and keep going, right? I mean, it's been such a freeing experience for me to do that. I'll tell you guys a quick little story. The very first Zoom presentation I gave was to a school district back in, I don't even know, let's say it was September or something like that. And so I'm advancing my slides. And at one point, we must have gone into a chat room like I did with you guys, and I couldn't go forward, but I didn't know what to do at that point. And my anxiety just grabbed me, and I didn't know what to do. And there's an IT person on the call, because at that point, none of us quite really knew how to do this. And I said to the IT person, I can't advance my slides. I don't know how to get out of this. You all have probably had that experience, right? Where like your prefrontal cortex just shuts down and you can't think. And the IT person comes on and says, press your space button or your space bar. And I didn't know what a space bar was in that moment. I was so hijacked, I didn't know what that was. So when I could get my words, I had to giggle and I said, I know this is ridiculous, but I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what a space bar is right now. And then I knew I really had to quiet myself. So I told everyone, let's just all take a minute right now, connect to our breath with a longer exhale, feel our feet on the ground, and hopefully my prefrontal cortex is going to show up and I'm going to figure out what to do. So we did that. And as I'm breathing for that minute, I see the space bar. I click it and my slides advance. But that's what happens to all of us, right? So we need to focus on what we can do in that moment, not what we can't do. And that really helps our wise mind show up and help us problem solve. So remember to allow the struggle while you're taking meaningful actions to where you want your life to go. I could do a whole workshop on the brain. But the thing I want you guys just to remember is that our brain is wired to remember what's been painful and to look ahead to make sure that we're not in that kind of pain again. And so if we allow our amygdala, our emotional brain, to take us where we want to go, we're going to have a hard time touching things again, hugging each other again, right? Because our brain is going to say, are you sure that that's okay? And even our bodies need to be exposed to germs again so that our immune system can get back to working full force. So you have to be very purposeful about driving yourself and your brain where you want it to go rather than letting your emotional brain tell you how to walk forward in life, okay? And you can just do that by just pausing in your day and think, how do I want today to go? And what are my action steps going to be that? Even if you found out that your friend got COVID or that, something's happening in Washington, D.C. today, and, the breaking news grabs your attention, remind yourself that you get to decide how you lead today. And you don't want your emotional brain to do that, okay? Provide supportive statements to those around you, both the kids that you're working with and your colleagues. So I do a program with parents. If I have a child that just really doesn't want to participate in exposure therapy and doing hard stuff, I can work just alone with the parents in terms of not accommodating. So I really work with the parents in listing all the ways that they accommodate this child. And then one by one, we give the child an announcement about how this isn't helping them learn how to develop skills to handle their worry and anxiety, and that we're going to remove this one accommodation. But you can't remove accommodations if you don't have a really confident, supportive statement, okay? So the part that I'm just working with you guys on today is make sure you've got this down. And there's two parts to that. And that is first validating what people have been through. If there's a particular student you're working with and they had a parent who died, or they were a part of the issue of not having access to internet and how embarrassing that was for them, that they needed extra resources to be able to connect virtually, like acknowledge that. I know that that was really hard in the beginning, or I know that you're still suffering tremendously. And I'm confident that you can handle those really hard feelings and move forward and be better than ever. So it's acknowledging the suffering and being confident that people can handle the suffering and take steps to move forward. And even if we don't believe that, trust me, life will carry us forward whether we're ready for it or not. It's kind of the beautiful thing. If I'm working with someone who's grieving and they think I can't do it, I can't do it, it's an amazing thing that life will take you forward anyways. I had that feeling when my daughter had cancer. I didn't think, I remember screaming at the nurse the next morning when we woke up in the hospital and saying, I can't do this. I was just terrified. And she looked me in the eyes and she gave me a statement like this, which is, I know you never could imagine being in this place, but you can do this and we are going to move forward. And that's like what I needed to hear to get myself back grounded and take the steps I needed to take. And then we need to find a way back to connection. I think you guys have been working on this all along, but we have to find a way to connect to these kids. Whether you're literally picking up the phone versus doing emails and calling. I was working with one school district and they had made the decision that they were going to text every kid. And I thought that was brilliant because normally we're communicating with the parents, or now you guys can email the kids. But of course, kids don't really respond to emails and they don't know how to pick up a phone and answer the phone, but they do respond to text messages. And so they started to text kids and they found that kids were actually responding to their text messages. Driveway visits. I don't know what you guys are doing right now. And maybe at the end, if we have a few minutes, we can actually have a conversation about this. But, is there a way to actually go to these kids' homes and meet them where they're at and give them a little, welcome back, or here's the new year starting next year kit, anything that you can do like that. And then small virtual groups, particularly for those kids that have social anxiety, they need to find a way to get connected again and begin to talk. And so is there a way that you can just start to put kids into small groups and play the bingo game with them? Talk about what they've been through. Don't make it about academics, but make it about how do we acknowledge what we've been through and how do we make steps to go forward. I can tell you that my colleagues, so I'm connected to all the anxiety and OCD experts in the world, and we have a private group where we are problem solving and trying to figure out how to help people. The thing that we are really focused on now is that there are so many kids that have just kind of opted out of coming to school. And how is it that we're going to get them back into a brick and mortar school? And how many of these kids are going to develop, school refusal when we all are back into a brick and mortar school? So stay tuned. Anxiety training, that's my business. We're going to actually create a school refusal webinar that you guys can download and watch. And we'll be doing that in the next few months. So anything you guys can do now to help them feel connected to school and to get back to giving them the information that school is a safe place. It always has been, and it will be for them. And you have done everything that you need to do to help them be safe, even though they're taking a risk by coming back, right? So just because we're doing everything we can to make it safe doesn't mean that life isn't risky. It was risky to them before. They could have gotten the flu. They could have broken a leg. We're just going to go back to taking those risks again and teaching our brain how to take those risks. Because once you isolate and you stay safe in your house and you only are on your computer, your brain kind of loses its ability to do that. So you really have to be very purposeful about making social connections, doing creative things, taking risks, going back out to grocery stores for those of you who still aren't doing that. Your brain needs you to teach it how to do that again, okay? And so, what does resilience look like? I mean, I usually start my anxiety talks about that our goal for students is to help them become resilient, and that we haven't been doing them any favors by preventing them from struggling, by giving them all kinds of awards, by making sure that they can be a part of every AP class they can imagine. And then the pandemic hit, and like all that, right? There isn't a child or a human being in the world that hasn't had to learn how to grow through this painful place. I'm telling you, I feel awful for the people that have been affected by this, for how they've been affected, and for the people who've lost their lives. But we now have a generation of kids who know about developing resilience. And I want you guys to grab that and take it forward. Sit down with them. I was working with the school district last week, and one of the principals decided that she was going to have a conversation. She was a principal of an elementary school, and she was going to see if she could find capes to give everyone a cape and say that they're superheroes. That they're superheroes, right? Never in the history of the world have children have to go through what they have gone through, and they have done it. They learned how to learn on their iPads or their Chromebooks or whatever. They learned how to ask questions through chat rooms. They learned how to stay home and not see their friends. They learned how to be connected to their families and help out. They're superheroes. And so if you can bring that language moving forward, that's going to be the silver lining. They learn about being flexible. They learn to accept that we can't do anything. We can't give them all the things they were used to be busy and active. They learned how to just be. They learned how to climb over obstacles, and so did you. They learned how to be connected to the important people in their life, rather than all the connections that were superficial, right? And hopefully, they became more comfortable being vulnerable, crying, talk about being scared. And what I believe with all the students that I work with is that maybe they fell behind academically, but they maybe gain something more. And that's how to be resilient. They loved watching you guys screw up and not know how to use your technology. They loved knowing more than you knew. Some of the kids had to teach you guys how to do it. They loved when things didn't go right and you had to be more flexible and give them more time on an assignment. Or a chemistry lab happened and they, you know, all the pictures of the thing didn't work out, the lab didn't happen, and you had to figure out another way of doing it. Okay? These kids watching all of you struggle was really important to them. So there are definitely silver linings. So we're going to end this with some energy, a little bit of fun, a little bit of hope. And if you know the song, sing along or dance along or whatever you want to do, because that's the other thing. Every minute we get to decide, are we going to connect to fear or are we going to connect to joy and hope? They both exist always. It's our choice. And when the song is over with, I'm going to ask everyone to turn on their videos, and I'm going to try and see all of you, and we'll just process things for just a few minutes before we end, okay? All right, here we go. Now I hope that you can hear it. Terry, I'm just going to quick play it, and you tell me if you can hear it, okay? Okay, I'm going to change my view to gallery view. Everyone want to turn on their videos? It's nice to actually see your faces. So thank you for being a part of this. Hopefully that gave you a little energy to go into the rest of your day. I want to open it up to see if you have questions, but before I do that, because you might have a question about this, I want to let you know about email that you're going to get that Terry's going to forward to you. And that is that many of you and many school districts throughout the United States have they're used to me coming into your school and teaching your staff and your students and even parents about how to live well with anxiety. And obviously that wasn't really able to happen over the last year. So I spent my time this past year creating Anxiety in the Schools bundle, which is 3 videos, webinars, virtual trainings, one for teachers and staff, one for parents, and one for students, along with resources and a handout with questions, so that if your school wants to have that information for all of you, then what I really encourage is that you show it at a faculty meeting, or you show it in your pods, or you show it in an SEL curriculum or a health class, or share it with the PTA. And then you use the handouts to have someone have a conversation about how all of us have felt anxiety and how do we move forward with this kind of fear looming over us. And there is information about how to live well during the pandemic in those videos as well. So if your school district is one of those that's been contacting me, or if you're interested in that information and you haven't been contacting me, know that that's up and running and ready to go. And so you're going to get an email on how to look at it. And if you have questions, just feel free to email me. I did look, and 2 people got bingo. I know more of you had to have gotten bingo if you're willing to actually, own up to it. So remember, you can email me, Kimberly@anxietytraining.com, if you got bingo, and I will email you back an e-version of my book. And so I'm going to be quiet for a minute. We've got 2 minutes. Does anyone have a question? This is one of the hard things, right? Because I have no idea if we have an introvert that really does have a question, but doesn't know how to kind of sneak in there, or if everyone's just ready to be done.
I'll throw out a question for you, Kimberly.
Okay.
I know they're actually looking at, I just received something saying that they're probably going to be shrinking the social distance guidelines, and I think they're looking at trying to bring more of our students back to school. So I guess what would be the one thing that you would, if we had to share something out to our students and our parents in terms of, how to help kids like process that, what would you say?
Okay, that's a loaded question. I mean, honestly, the hardest part is getting everybody on board, right? Because some of you aren't going to agree with it. Some of the parents aren't going to agree with it. The students are looking to all of you being like, when there's too many differing opinions and differences, that's where anxiety shows itself. So the best thing that you guys can all do is be united, not divided. Didn't you guys love that song, by the way? Was anybody bebopping to it? But literally, whether you agree with the decision or not, whether you think your governor is full of shit or not, because I hear all of that, so that's why I'm using that language. What you need to do for the students, and the message that you really need to send parents first, is that we have to be united with this decision, because we have to help our kids walk forward even though they're scared. So if you guys probably don't remember all my language from the first time you were with me, but that's a big way that I talk to kids, is even though you feel scared, even though we're not sure what this is going to look like, I can do it anyways. I can handle it, and I'm going to start taking those steps forward anyways. And as long as you're taking steps forward, you will get through it and get to the other side. But you have to be united yourselves, and you have to use that very confident language, even though we're not sure what this is going to look like, even though some of you might be scared, even though there might be differences of opinion.